Surrey, October 1818. The servants' wing of Wickham Manor held a particular chill that autumn morning, one that seeped through the thin walls and settled into the bones of its single occupant with the familiarity of an old acquaintance. Miss Theodora Sutton sat at the small writing desk beneath her narrow window, the pale morning light illuminating the ledger spread before her. One entry in particular, regarding a new agricultural venture, had troubled her earlier, a nagging inconsistency she intended to investigate fully when time permitted. She wondered how it was possible for a house so grand to feel so utterly cold. At 27, Theodora had long since abandoned the girlish dreams that once sustained her through the first years of her dependence. The account books before her told a different story than the one her family presented to Surrey society. While her uncle, Lord Wickham, entertained guests in drawing rooms adorned with fine paintings, and her 4 cousins paraded through assembly rooms in silk gowns, Theodora sat in quarters designed for upper servants and prevented the entire estate from collapsing into financial ruin. Her father, the second son of a baron, had died of a heart seizure when she was 15, leaving behind gambling debts that consumed every penny of his modest inheritance. Her mother had survived him by only 3 years, grief and shame eroding her health until she simply faded away. Lord Wickham had taken them in, but charity came with a price Theodora paid daily. If stories of invisible women who find their worth through the eyes of someone brave enough to truly see them move your heart, subscribe now and join us on this journey. You will not want to miss what happens next. The morning held a peculiar tension that Theodora could not quite identify. She had learned over 12 years to read the subtle shifts in the household atmosphere the way some people read the weather. Something was brewing, though she could not yet determine what. Her door opened without warning. There was no knock, and certainly no courtesy. Her cousin Prudence stood in the doorway, 24 years old and freshly returned from her honeymoon as the new Countess of Ashford. Her dress, a morning gown of primrose silk, would have cost more than Theodora had spent on clothing in 5 years. "Mama wants you in the kitchens immediately," Prudence announced, her voice carrying that particular tone of satisfaction that always preceded some new humiliation. "There is a crisis, apparently, and the servants are quite useless without your supervision." Theodora closed the ledger carefully, marking her place. "What manner of crisis?" "As if I would know the details of kitchen management." Prudence examined her gloved hands with exaggerated disinterest. "It concerns tonight's dinner. Mama is in quite a state." Tonight's dinner. Theodora felt a small flutter of alarm. Lord Wickham had mentioned something 3 days prior about a parliamentary colleague, but he had been vague as always, and she had assumed the matter forgotten. "Is there to be a dinner party tonight?" she asked carefully. Prudence's smile was not kind. "Did no one tell you? How terribly careless. Yes, Lord Wickham has invited the Marquess of Stratham. Mama only learned of it this morning. You can imagine her distress." The Marquess of Stratham. Even Theodora, sequestered as she was from society, knew that name. Lord Sebastian Harcourt, one of the wealthiest and most eligible noblemen in England, famously particular about whom he honored with his time and attention. And he was coming here, tonight. "I see," Theodora said quietly. "I shall attend to the kitchens at once." "See that you do. And Theodora?" Prudence paused in the doorway, her expression hardening. "Mamma has instructed that you are to remain in your quarters this evening. We cannot have the Marquess seeing our charity case and forming unfavorable impressions of the family. You understand, of course." Of course she understood. The kitchens were indeed in chaos when Theodora arrived. Mrs. Keating, the cook who had served Wickham Manor for 30 years, turned to her with visible relief. "Miss Sutton, thank heavens. Her ladyship has ordered a dinner for 8 this evening, 5 courses, and we have only the usual provisions. She insists upon game when we have none prepared, demands French sauces we lack ingredients for, and expects miracles from thin air." Theodora surveyed the situation with practiced efficiency. She spotted a crate of pheasants and the remnants of the cellar's fortified wine. "We shall use the pheasant stock for the soup," Theodora instructed firmly, moving to the work table, "and mask the lack of venison by preparing the mutton with a rich port reduction. What do we have in the larders?" Within 20 minutes, she had reordered the entire menu around available ingredients, sent footmen to neighboring estates with polite requests to borrow specific items, and directed the staff into a workable schedule. It was a skill she had developed over years of necessity. Her aunt possessed neither the temperament nor the competence for household management, and her uncle noticed such details only when their absence created scandal. "You are a blessing, Miss Sutton," Mrs. Keating said warmly. "I do not know what this household would do without you." Neither did Theodora, though none of the family would ever acknowledge it. She spent the morning and afternoon moving through the servants' passages, consulting with staff, making decisions that would ensure the evening's success. She overheard her cousins in the music room, practicing their performance pieces. Lavinia, married 2 years to a viscount, was coaching the youngest, Cecilia, who at 20 was the only sister still unwed. The Marquess of Stratham is said to be impossibly particular. 3 seasons he has observed without showing interest in anyone. If you could catch his attention, it would be the triumph of the decade. "He must be dreadfully old if he is so particular," Cecilia complained. "He is 33, Georgiana supplied. She had married an earl the previous spring and considered herself an authority on such matters, but exceedingly handsome, or so I am told. Dark hair, striking features, and a presence that commands attention. More importantly," Prudence added, "he is wealthy beyond imagining and possesses significant political influence. Any woman who becomes his marchioness would be among the most powerful in England." Their mother's voice cut through the chatter. "Girls, please. You must not appear eager or ambitious. Gentlemen of Lord Stratham's caliber prefer women who are charming but not clever, agreeable but not opinionated. Smile, defer to his judgments, and for heaven's sake, do not discuss anything substantive. Men dislike women who think too much." Theodora, hidden in the passage checking that candles were properly distributed, felt something twist in her chest. She had spent years observing her cousins perform this elaborate dance of feminine accomplishment, watching them transform into whatever the current matrimonial target seemed to prefer. It had worked well enough. All 4 had secured titled husbands. But at what cost? She returned to her quarters as instructed as the afternoon shadows lengthened. Her small room overlooked the kitchen gardens, and she could see the increased activity below as final preparations commenced. Her stomach twisted with an emotion she did not care to examine too closely. Hunger, perhaps. She had eaten little that day, too occupied with managing the household crisis. Or perhaps it was something else, something that felt uncomfortably like loneliness. The account ledgers still lay on her desk, and she forced herself to focus on them. Numbers had always provided comfort. They were honest, consistent, following rules that made sense. Unlike people, numbers could be trusted. It was while reviewing the estate investments that she confirmed her earlier suspicion. The Carrington agricultural venture. Lord Wickham had mentioned it briefly 3 weeks prior, speaking enthusiastically about projected returns of 15% annually. Theodora had made a note to investigate, consulting the stack of agricultural journals and back issues of the Times she kept in her uncle's study. Now, with time to examine the details properly, she saw the pattern. The promised returns were impossible, given the stated investments. The letters of recommendation from satisfied investors followed a suspicious pattern of timing and language. The company proprietors had no verifiable history in agricultural development. Every indicator pointed to one conclusion. It was a fraudulent enterprise, a swindle designed to extract money from wealthy but unsophisticated investors. Her uncle had committed £8,000. Theodora stared at the figures, her mind racing through implications. £8,000 represented a significant portion of the estate's liquid capital. If lost, it would require selling property to cover existing debts. The scandal would be immense. She had to tell him, but her aunt had explicitly forbidden her to appear this evening. To interrupt the dinner party with such news would be seen as attention-seeking, as attempting to make herself important. She could already hear Lady Wickham's outraged voice. Yet if she remained silent, her uncle would lose a fortune. Theodora rose from her desk, pacing the small confines of her room. Through the floorboards, she could hear the sounds of the dinner party below. Laughter, conversation, the clink of crystal. Her cousins would be performing brilliantly, her aunt presiding with satisfaction, her uncle obliviously enjoying his claret, and the Marquess of Stratham, legendary for his intelligence and careful judgment, would be watching it all. What would such a man think if he knew the truth? That the elegant dinner was managed by the invisible niece locked in the servants' wing? That the household accounts were maintained by the poor relation forbidden to show her face? That the whole pretty performance rested on the competence of a woman treated as a burden rather than an asset? She made her decision. Gathering her notes on the Carrington scheme, Theodora smoothed her dress as best she could. It had been Lavinia's 5 years prior, altered to fit Theodora's taller, slimmer frame. The color, a dull bronze that had never suited Lavinia, did nothing for Theodora's complexion, but it was the best she owned. Her hair, dark brown with hints of copper when the light struck it properly, she had arranged simply that morning. There was no time now for improvement. She descended the servants' stairs, her heart pounding with each step. The dinner party was in the drawing room when she arrived. She could hear voices through the closed door, her aunt's high laugh, her uncle's jovial tones. Theodora hesitated, her hand raised to knock. To disturb a formal dinner was a sin against every rule of etiquette she knew, but £8,000 meant ruin. She knocked. The conversation inside stuttered and stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened, and her uncle's face appeared, flushed with wine and irritation. "Theodora? What the devil are you doing here? Your aunt was quite clear that you were to remain upstairs." "I apologize for the interruption, Uncle, but there is an urgent estate matter that requires your immediate attention." "Estate matter? Now? Can it not wait until morning?" "I truly do not believe it can, sir." Lord Wickham's face reddened further, but before he could respond, another voice spoke from within the room. "Perhaps I might be of assistance. I have some expertise in estate matters." The voice was deep, cultured, carrying an undertone of command that suggested its owner was accustomed to being obeyed. Theodora felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with nerves about the account books. "That is very kind, my lord," her uncle said, clearly flustered. "But I am certain this is nothing that need concern you. A minor household matter. Theodora, return to your quarters and we shall discuss this tomorrow. I am afraid it concerns a significant financial investment, Uncle. One that requires immediate action if losses are to be prevented." Lady Wickham's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Wickham, send her away at once. This is intolerable. Theodora knows perfectly well she is not to intrude on family gatherings." "I do apologize, Aunt. I would not interrupt if the matter were not genuinely urgent." "How dare you?" Lady Wickham appeared beside her husband, her face contorted with fury. "You forget yourself entirely. Return to your quarters immediately, and we shall discuss your impudence tomorrow." "Let her speak." The words were quiet, but carried absolute authority. The Marquess of Stratham moved into view, and Theodora felt her breath catch. He was indeed handsome, though handsome seemed an inadequate word. Dark hair swept back from a face of striking planes and angles, eyes of deep gray that seemed to perceive far more than they should, a mouth that suggested both intelligence and carefully controlled passion. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with a confidence that came not from arrogance, but from absolute certainty of his own capabilities. And he was looking directly at her with an expression of focused interest that made Theodora's carefully constructed composure tremble. "My lord, this is a family matter," Lady Wickham protested, her voice rising. "My niece forgets her place." "Your niece appears to be attempting to prevent a financial disaster," Lord Stratham observed. His gaze had not left Theodora's face. "I find that admirable rather than impertinent. Please, Miss Sutton, do come in and explain the situation." It was not a request. It was a command delivered with such casual certainty that even Lady Wickham could not refuse without creating an even greater scene. She stepped back, her expression promising future retribution, and Theodora entered the drawing room on trembling legs. Her 4 cousins sat in an elegant arrangement near the fireplace, their faces reflecting varying degrees of shock and malicious pleasure. Prudence's eyes gleamed with anticipation of Theodora's humiliation. Lavinia's mouth curved in a small, cruel smile. Georgiana looked merely uncomfortable. Cecilia stared with open curiosity. Theodora kept her head high despite the burning shame in her cheeks. She had learned long ago that dignity was the only armor she possessed. "My lord, uncle, I have been reviewing the estate accounts as is my usual practice," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have discovered a concerning pattern in the Carrington agricultural venture that my uncle recently invested in." Lord Wickham frowned. "The Carrington scheme? But that was recommended by Petersham himself. Promised excellent returns." "I am certain it was recommended in good faith, uncle. However, upon examining the company's published reports and comparing them with letters of recommendation from the past 3 years, I have identified several irregularities that suggest the venture is fraudulent." "Fraudulent?" Her uncle's face went pale. "Theodora, that is a very serious accusation." "I am aware, sir. That is why I would not make it without substantial evidence." She held out her carefully prepared notes. "The promised annual returns of 15% are impossible given the stated agricultural investments. Grain yields, even in optimal conditions, cannot support such profits. Moreover, the letters from satisfied investors follow an unusual pattern. They appear at precise 6-month intervals, use remarkably similar language, and reference yields that would require impossible weather conditions across multiple regions simultaneously." Lord Stratham had moved closer, his attention riveted on Theodora's face. "Continue, Miss Sutton." "Additionally, I took the liberty of researching the company proprietors. None have verifiable backgrounds in agricultural development. Their previous ventures, when they can be traced at all, follow a consistent pattern. Large investments secured, impressive initial reports, then the companies dissolve before any actual returns materialize. In 2 cases I found, investors lost everything. The room had fallen completely silent. Even Lady Wickham seemed momentarily speechless. "How much have you invested, Wickham?" Lord Stratham asked quietly. £8,000, Theodora answered when her uncle seemed unable to speak. "Committed last month with an additional 4,000 promised for the spring planting." "Good God," her uncle breathed. The color drained from his face, and beads of perspiration broke out on his forehead as he stared at the damning figures in Theodora's hand. "If you are correct, Theodora, if this is indeed a fraud, the loss would be catastrophic." "I am afraid I am quite confident in my analysis, uncle. I would recommend you withdraw your investment immediately and consult with your solicitor about potential legal recourse." Lord Stratham took the notes from Theodora's hand, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through her entire arm. He studied her careful documentation, his expression growing increasingly intent. "This analysis is remarkably thorough, Miss Sutton. Where did you learn such investigative techniques?" "I read extensively, my lord. I make use of my uncle's subscription to The Times and his library, and I have managed the estate accounts for several years. One develops a sense for patterns and irregularities." "Manage the estate accounts?" His gray eyes lifted to her face, and Theodora saw something in them she could not quite interpret. Surprise, certainly, but also something that looked almost like recognition. "That is considerable responsibility. Theodora has always had an unfortunate interest in inappropriate subjects," Lady Wickham interjected, her voice tight with barely suppressed fury. We have tried to discourage such unladylike pursuits, but she persists in meddling with matters beyond her understanding. On the contrary, Lord Stratham said softly, still looking at Theodora. Miss Sutton appears to understand a great deal. Wickham, I was considering the Carrington venture myself. Petersham approached me with the same proposal. I had not yet committed funds, but I certainly intended to. Your niece's analysis has saved me from what would indeed have been a substantial loss. He turned to face the room, and Theodora saw her aunt's expression shift from fury to calculation. Miss Sutton, I wonder if you might be willing to examine some other investment proposals I have received recently. I value careful analysis, and yours appears exceptionally astute. It was a public acknowledgement of her competence, delivered with such casual authority that no one could protest without insulting the Marquess himself. Theodora felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something dangerous that she immediately tried to suppress. I would be honored to assist in any way I can, my lord. Excellent. Perhaps you might join us for the remainder of the evening? I find I would very much like to hear your thoughts on estate management. It is a subject I take seriously, and competent advice is surprisingly difficult to find. The invitation hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Lady Wickham's face had gone an alarming shade of purple. Prudence looked as though she might faint from outrage. Cecilia's careful pose of elegant availability had crumbled into open shock. The Marquess of Stratham, the most eligible nobleman in England, was requesting the company of the poor relation over her accomplished cousins. That is very kind, my lord, Theodora began carefully, but I would not wish to intrude further on the family's evening. Nonsense. I insist. He offered her his arm with the same casual certainty that characterized all his movements. Come, Miss Sutton. Tell me more about these account books you manage. I find I am fascinated by the precise methods you employ. Theodora took his arm because refusing would create an even greater scene. The fabric of his coat was fine wool beneath her fingers, and she could feel the solid strength of the muscle beneath. He led her to a settee near the window, deliberately positioning them slightly apart from the others. Lady Wickham had no choice but to resume her hostess duties, though her smile had taken on a brittle, dangerous quality. Theodora's cousins attempted to recapture the Marquess's attention with renewed performances of charm, but he deflected each attempt with polite disinterest, his attention consistently returning to Theodora. Your uncle mentioned you have lived here since your father's death, he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. That must have been difficult. My uncle and aunt were very kind to take us in, Theodora replied carefully. We would have had nowhere else to go. Kindness, he repeated, and something in his tone suggested he saw through the polite fiction. And in exchange for this kindness, you manage the estate accounts, prevent financial disasters, and orchestrate household operations? I do what I can to be useful. I suspect you do considerably more than that. His gray eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Tell me, Miss Sutton, what else do you do that no one acknowledges? The question was too perceptive, too direct. Theodora felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with her shabby dress or her subordinate position. I read, she said finally. I have access to my uncle's library when the family is otherwise occupied. I find books to be excellent company. What do you read? Political philosophy mostly, political economy, estate management treatises. I find them fascinating. She expected him to look shocked or disapproving. Ladies were not supposed to interest themselves in such subjects, but instead, his expression shifted into something that looked remarkably like delight. Have you read Malthus's Essay on Population? I have, my lord, though I confess I find some of his conclusions overly pessimistic. As do I. What is your objection specifically? And just like that, they were engaged in genuine conversation. Not the stilted performance of social pleasantries that characterized most interactions, but real discourse about substantive ideas. They debated economic theory, discussed the implications of the Corn Laws, argued about land management practices. Theodora forgot to be self-conscious about her inferior position. She forgot to measure her words carefully. She simply spoke, and Lord Stratham listened, as though her opinions mattered. It was the most exhilarating hour of her life. Across the room, Lady Wickham's fury was building to dangerous levels. Her daughters sat neglected while the Marquess monopolized the poor relations company. Every attempt to redirect his attention failed. When Cecilia offered to play the pianoforte, he politely declined. When Lavinia suggested they move to the music room for entertainment, he demurred. His focus remained fixed on Theodora with an intensity that could not be misinterpreted. Finally, as the evening drew to a close, Lord Stratham rose and addressed Lord Wickham directly. "I wonder if I might presume to call again in the coming days. I find myself very interested in discussing estate management matters further. Your household clearly operates with impressive efficiency, and I should like to understand the systems that make it so successful." It was a transparent excuse, and everyone in the room knew it. He was not interested in systems. He was interested in Theodora. "Of course, my lord," Lord Wickham said, clearly bewildered by the turn the evening had taken. "You are always welcome at Wickham Manor." Lord Stratham turned to Theodora and bowed with a formality usually reserved for ladies of far higher station. "Miss Sutton, I look forward to continuing our conversation. Your insights are most valuable." He left, and in his wake, silence fell like a dropped stone. Then Lady Wickham turned on Theodora with a fury that had been simmering all evening. "You deliberately set out to capture his attention," she hissed, her careful social mask shattering. "You interrupted our dinner party, forced yourself into company where you did not belong, and threw yourself at the Marquess in the most shameless manner imaginable." "I did no such thing, Aunt. I came to warn Uncle about the investment." "Do not lie to me, girl. You have been plotting this. You saw an opportunity to put yourself forward, and you seized it without a moment's thought for the family's reputation or your cousin's prospects." Prudence stepped forward, her face twisted with vindictive pleasure. "You have always been jealous, Theodora. Jealous that we married well while you remained unwanted. And now you think to steal the attention of a Marquess through trickery and manipulation." "The Marquess asked for my opinion on financial matters," Theodora said quietly. "I answered his questions honestly." "You discussed political philosophy and political economy like some dreadful bluestocking," Lavinia added. "No wonder you have never married. You lack every feminine quality men find desirable." "Enough." Lord Wickham's voice cut through the attacks. He looked tired and troubled. "Theodora came to warn me of a fraudulent investment. If her analysis is correct, and I suspect it is, she has saved this family from financial ruin. We owe her gratitude, not recriminations." "You are too soft with her, Wickham," Lady Wickham snapped. "She needs to understand her place. We took her in out of charity when she had nothing. The least she can do is show proper deference and not embarrass the family by pursuing gentlemen so far above her station." "I pursued no one," Theodora said, her voice trembling despite her efforts at control. "I answered questions when asked. I did nothing improper." "Your very existence is improper," her aunt replied coldly. "A reminder of my husband's brother's poor judgment and worse luck. I have tolerated you for years, Theodora, but I will not tolerate you interfering with my daughter's prospects. The Marquess of Stratham is far beyond your reach, and I will not have you embarrassing this family by encouraging false hopes." "I have no hopes, false or otherwise." "See that you maintain that realistic understanding. Now remove yourself to your quarters and do not emerge until I grant permission. Is that understood?" Theodora curtsied, her movements mechanical. "Yes, Aunt." She climbed the stairs to the servants' wing on legs that felt like lead. Behind her, she could hear her cousins' voices rising in excited, vicious speculation about her presumption and certain upcoming humiliation. In her small room, Theodora sat at her desk and stared at the ledgers without seeing them. Her hands were trembling. Whether from anger or something else, she could not say. Lord Sebastian Harcourt had treated her like an equal. He had listened to her opinions as though they mattered. He had looked at her as though he saw not a charity case, but a person of value. It had been the cruelest kindness imaginable, because now she knew what it felt like to be seen, and returning to invisibility would be so much harder. The following days brought an unexpected shift in the household's carefully maintained order. Lord Stratham called, as promised, and then called again. He arrived with investment proposals for Theodora's review, requests for her thoughts on estate improvements, questions about account management systems. Each visit, Lady Wickham grew more furious and more desperate. She forbade Theodora to appear when the Marquess called, locking her in her quarters and informing him that her niece was indisposed. Lord Stratham responded by asking Lord Wickham directly why his competent estate manager was being hidden away. When that proved ineffective, he began arriving unannounced at hours when Theodora was likely to be managing household matters, effectively circumventing Lady Wickham's restrictions. Theodora tried to maintain appropriate distance. She knew this could only end in disappointment. Men like Lord Stratham did not marry poor relations, no matter how stimulating they found their conversation. He was amusing himself with an intellectual puzzle, and once the novelty faded, he would return to his own world, and she would be left with the bitter knowledge of what she could never have. But despite her efforts at self-protection, she found herself anticipating his visits with a hope she knew was dangerous. Their conversations ranged far beyond estate matters. They discussed literature, philosophy, politics, science. He brought her books from his own library, volumes she had longed to read but could never access. He asked her opinions on parliamentary debates and listened to her answers with a respect that still felt unreal. "Why do you tolerate it?" he asked one afternoon 3 weeks after their first meeting. They were in Lord Wickham's study, ostensibly reviewing account ledgers, but the conversation had drifted, as it always did, into more personal territory. "Tolerate what, my lord?" "The treatment, your aunt's cruelty, your cousin's contempt. You are clearly the most capable person in this household, yet you are treated as though your value is measured in your utility as an unpaid servant." Theodora's hands stilled on the ledger page. "I have nowhere else to go. My father left nothing but debts. I have no marriage prospects and no means of supporting myself. My uncle provides me shelter and food. I am grateful for that." Grateful. He repeated the word with such distaste that Theodora looked up in surprise. "You should not have to be grateful for basic human dignity, Theodora." The use of her given name, spoken in his deep voice with such quiet intensity, made her breath catch. They had maintained strict formality until now, the social distance appropriate between a Marquess and a dependent relative of a mere baron. Hearing her name on his lips felt intimate in a way that frightened her. In her mind, she had already begun to think of him as Stratham, but she dared not voice it. "Lord Stratham, I think perhaps we should maintain proper forms of address." "Sebastian," he said immediately. "My name is Sebastian, and I would very much like to hear you say it." "That would be highly inappropriate." "Many things are inappropriate, Theodora. That does not make them wrong." He leaned forward, his gray eyes intense on hers. "I have spent weeks observing you, listening to you, learning who you are beneath the role you have been forced to play. You are remarkable, brilliant, kind, resilient, possessing more genuine character than anyone else I have encountered in years of searching. And I am tired of pretending this is merely about estate management advice." Theodora felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "What is it about, then?" "It is about the fact that I find myself thinking about you constantly. About your mind, yes, but also about your courage in enduring circumstances that would have broken someone with less strength. About the way your eyes light up when you are debating a point you feel passionate about. About how your smile, on the rare occasions you allow yourself to show it, transforms your entire face into something so beautiful it makes my chest ache. Please do not say such things." Theodora stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "You are being kind, but kindness that offers false hope is cruelty." There is nothing false about it. Sebastian rose as well, his movements controlled, but his expression fierce. Theodora, I am not a man who speaks carelessly. When I say you are remarkable, I mean it. When I say I think of you constantly, I am stating simple fact. You are a Marquess. I am a penniless dependent with no prospects and no family willing to sponsor me into society. Whatever you imagine this could be, it is impossible. Why? Because the difference in our stations is insurmountable. Because your duty is to marry someone appropriate to your position. Because I have nothing to offer you except conversation, and conversation cannot sustain a marriage in our world. You truly believe that? He moved closer, and Theodora found herself unable to retreat further, trapped between him and the desk. You believe all I value in you is your ability to discuss political economy? What else could there be? I am not beautiful like my cousins. I have no accomplishments, no social graces, no connections. I am quite literally nothing by society's measure. Society's measure is deeply flawed. His hand lifted, and Theodora's breath stopped as his fingers gently traced the line of her jaw. The touch was feather-light, but sent sparks through her entire body. You are beautiful, Theodora. Not in the obvious, performative way your cousins cultivate, but in a way that reveals itself slowly to anyone wise enough to look. You have elegant bones, intelligent eyes that miss nothing, and a grace of bearing that no amount of shabby clothing can diminish. But more than that, you have a quality of genuine selfhood that I have never encountered before. I do not understand what you mean. Most women I meet are performing, presenting whatever version of femininity they believe will capture a husband. They flatter, defer, and hide any aspect of themselves that might be deemed unsuitable. But you? His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Theodora shivered. You are simply yourself, honest, direct, unconcerned with playing games or managing impressions. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious? It is not a virtue, Sebastian. The name slipped out without thought. It is merely that I have nothing to lose by being honest. I am already invisible. You are not invisible to me. His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. I perceive your true character, Theodora. I see the woman beneath the circumstances, and I find myself wanting things I had convinced myself I no longer desired. What things? Instead of answering, he leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Theodora knew she should. If a servant entered, if her aunt returned, she would be ruined beyond redemption. The risk was absolute. But she could not make herself retreat. His lips were warm and firm against hers, and the kiss awakened something she had kept carefully buried for years. Longing, hope, the dangerous belief that perhaps she might be worthy of love after all. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion she did not dare name. I am falling in love with you, he said simply. I know it is too soon to speak so directly, and I know the obstacles are substantial. But I am tired of pretending this is anything other than what it is. I came here looking for competent financial advice and found instead the woman I have been searching for without knowing I was searching. I will not apologize for that, and I will not pretend otherwise. Theodora felt tears building behind her eyes. You do not know what you are asking. The scandal of a Marquess courting a penniless nobody would be enormous. Your family would object. Society would gossip. My aunt would claim I manipulated you. Let them gossip. Let your aunt spew whatever poison she wishes. I do not care, Theodora. The only question that matters is whether you feel anything at all for me in return. Of course I do. The admission came out broken. I have tried not to. I have told myself it was foolish and hopeless and would only lead to pain. But when you look at me as though I matter, when you listen to my opinions as though they have value, when you simply see me, how could I not feel something? He kissed her again. deeper this time, his arms coming around her to pull her close. Theodora melted into the embrace, allowing herself this moment even though she knew it could not last. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard. "I must speak with your uncle," Sebastian said, "properly, formally, requesting permission to court you openly. He will refuse. My aunt will ensure it. Then we shall find another way. Theodora, I am not a man who abandons what he wants, and I want you, not as a mistress, not as a passing fancy, but as my wife, as my partner, as the woman who shares my name and my life. You are asking me to believe in the impossible. I am asking you to believe in me." He cupped her face in his hands, his expression fierce and tender at once. "I will not lie to you. The path ahead will not be easy, but I promise you this. I will fight for you. I will fight your family's objections, society's disapproval, and any other obstacle that arises. The only thing I cannot fight is your own unwillingness to try. So I am asking you now, plainly and honestly, will you let me try? Will you give me the chance to prove that this is real and possible?" Theodora looked into his gray eyes and saw absolute sincerity. No games, no manipulation, no hidden agenda, just honest emotion offered without pretense. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Sebastian, I will let you try." His smile transformed his entire face. "Then we begin." The following weeks tested that promise in ways Theodora had not anticipated. Lady Wickham's opposition became overt and vicious. She forbade Theodora to leave her quarters, except for essential household duties, stationed servants to prevent Sebastian from speaking with her, and launched a campaign of whispered poison throughout the county. The gossip spread like fire. Poor, desperate Theodora Sutton had thrown herself at the Marquess of Stratham in the most shameless manner. She had manipulated her way into his good graces through trickery. She was a fortune hunter of the worst sort, willing to exploit any opportunity to elevate herself above her proper station. Someone really should inform the Marquess of her true character before he made a terrible mistake. Theodora endured the whispers with the same dignity she had always maintained. She knew the truth of her feelings and Sebastian's. The opinions of people who had never truly seen her mattered less than they might have expected. But watching Sebastian fight against the tide of social disapproval was painful in ways she had not anticipated. He called on her uncle repeatedly, requesting formal permission to court her. Each time, Lord Wickham gave the same apologetic refusal. His wife would not countenance it. The family's reputation must be considered. Surely the Marquess could see that such a match was inappropriate. Sebastian responded by inviting the entire Wickham family to a house party at Stratham Park in December. The invitation was delivered publicly at a county assembly, impossible to refuse without causing even greater scandal. Lady Wickham accepted through gritted teeth, already planning how to use the opportunity to push her daughters forward while keeping Theodora firmly in the background. "She will try to humiliate you," Sebastian warned Theodora during one of their stolen conversations. They met in the library late at night when the household slept, the only time they could speak freely. "She will attempt to demonstrate publicly that you are unsuitable, inferior, not worthy of notice." "I know." Theodora kept her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. "But I also know that refusing to attend would hurt you politically. Your invitation to the entire family was strategic. Excluding yourself from your own house party would create exactly the scandal you are trying to prevent. You understand the game remarkably well. I have been observing it for 12 years, Sebastian. I may not have been allowed to play, but I have learned the rules." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I hate that you have to endure this. You should be celebrated, not attacked. Your intelligence and capability should be recognized as the gifts they are. The world does not work that way. Perhaps it is time the world changed." He kissed her temple. "Trust me, Theodora. I have a plan." Stratham Park in winter was breathtaking. The house itself was an elegant Georgian manor set in extensive grounds, its classical lines softened by ivy and age. Inside, high ceilings and tall windows created spaces that were both grand and surprisingly intimate. A bachelor establishment, certainly, with touches that suggested aesthetic appreciation, but lacked the warmth of true habitation. It was, Theodora realized, profoundly lonely. The house party assembled slowly over 3 days in mid-December. Sebastian had invited not just the Wickham family, but a careful selection of other guests. The Dowager Countess of Rathmore, his late mother's closest friend and a formidable social power. Sir Edward and Lady Hartwick, progressive nobles known for their support of intellectual women. Several young couples whose marriages had been based on genuine affection rather than merely advantageous alliances. And a handful of political colleagues whose respect Sebastian valued. Theodora was given a beautiful guest chamber in the family wing, notably not relegated to lesser quarters. Sebastian introduced her to each arriving guest with the same respect he showed everyone else, his message clear. Miss Theodora Sutton was a valued guest, not a poor relation to be overlooked. Lady Wickham's fury was palpable. Her daughters, accustomed to being the center of attention, found themselves eclipsed by other guests who commanded more social power. Prudence's title as Countess of Ashford meant little when the Dowager Countess of Rathmore held court. Lavinia's and Georgiana's viscounts and earls were pleasant, but not particularly influential. And Cecilia, still unwed, found herself competing with several other young ladies whose families were far more prominent. The first dinner was an exercise in social warfare. Lady Wickham attempted repeatedly to direct conversation away from substantive topics toward the sort of vapid pleasantries she considered appropriate. The Dowager Countess, a sharp-eyed woman of 70 with no patience for nonsense, deflected each attempt with surgical precision. "Tell me, Miss Sutton," the Dowager said during a lull in conversation, her voice carrying the length of the table. "Stratham mentioned you have been advising him on estate investments. Quite impressive for one so young. Where did you develop such expertise?" Every eye turned to Theodora. She felt her aunt's gaze boring into her, promising retribution for any misstep. But Sebastian was watching her as well, his expression encouraging. "I have had the privilege of managing my uncle's estate accounts for several years, my lady," Theodora replied. "The responsibility required that I educate myself in financial matters, reading, primarily, and practical application of principles learned. Self-taught, then, even more impressive. Too many young people today lack intellectual curiosity. They prefer to remain ignorant and call it feminine propriety." The Dowager's tone made clear what she thought of such attitudes. "What are you reading currently?" "Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, my lady. I find his theories on division of labor fascinating, though I believe he underestimates the role of skilled craftsmanship in certain industries." "You disagree with Smith? How bold. I should very much like to hear your reasoning." What followed was a genuine intellectual discussion that ranged from economics to philosophy to political theory. Theodora forgot to be self-conscious, forgot to measure her words carefully. She simply engaged, and the other guests engaged back. Several expressed surprise at her depth of knowledge. Sir Edward asked her opinion on parliamentary matters. Lady Hartwick invited her to a salon she hosted monthly in London for women interested in serious discourse. And through it all, Sebastian watched her with an expression that made Theodora's heart ache. Pride, certainly, but also something deeper. A recognition that said, "This is who you are. This is what you were meant to be." Not hidden away and diminished, but celebrated and engaged. Lady Wickham's face had gone gray with fury. After dinner, when the ladies retired to the drawing room for tea, she cornered Theodora in a window embrasure while the other guests were occupied with conversation. "You are making a spectacle of yourself," she hissed, her voice low and vicious. "Putting yourself forward, discussing subjects no proper lady mentions, monopolizing the Marquess's guests' attention when you should be invisible. You embarrass yourself and this family with every word." "I am answering questions put to me, Aunt. I have done nothing inappropriate. Everything about you is inappropriate. Your very presence here is inappropriate. You are a charity case, Theodora, a burden I have borne for 12 years out of Christian duty. The fact that the Marquess has been temporarily charmed by your pretense of intelligence does not change what you are. Nothing. No one. A spinster dependent with no prospects and no value beyond your ability to manage accounts. You would do well to remember that before you make yourself ridiculous, harboring impossible hopes. Each word was designed to wound, delivered with a precision born of years of practice. Theodora felt them strike like physical blows, because beneath the cruelty was a grain of truth she could not deny. She was dependent, penniless, socially invisible. Sebastian's interest was extraordinary, aberrant, likely temporary. I know exactly what I am, Aunt. I have never forgotten for a moment. Then stop this performance. Stop putting yourself forward. Accept reality with whatever dignity you can still claim and withdraw gracefully before you are publicly rejected. Because make no mistake, Theodora, you will be rejected. Men like the Marquess of Stratham do not marry women like you. And when he moves on to someone appropriate, you will be left humiliated before all of society, your foolish hopes exposed for the delusions they always were. The Dowager Countess's voice cut through the venom like a blade. Lady Wickham, I wonder if I might borrow Miss Sutton for a moment. There is a particular plant in the conservatory I wish her opinion on. It was a transparent rescue, and Lady Wickham could not refuse without being overtly rude. She smiled tightly and stepped aside, though her eyes promised this conversation was far from finished. The Dowager led Theodora to the conservatory, a beautiful glass structure filled with exotic plants that Sebastian had collected from various travels. For a few moments, they simply walked in silence among the greenery. Your aunt is a deeply unpleasant woman, the Dowager said finally. I have known many like her over my 70 years. Women who diminish others because their own lives are small and their own worth questionable. What she said to you was cruel and designed to break your spirit. She spoke truth, my lady, however unkindly. Did she? Let us examine that truth. You are penniless. This is fact, not a reflection of your character. You are dependent on family who treat you shamefully. Also fact, also not your fault. You are socially invisible. By whose choice? Not your own. You were never given a proper debut, never introduced to society, never allowed the opportunities your cousins received. That invisibility was imposed, not inherent. I'm still all those things the world considers disqualifying, my lady. The world considers many things disqualifying that are, in truth, irrelevant, the Dowager countered sharply. I was once told I was too old to matter, too outspoken to be acceptable, too independent to be tolerated. Yet here I am, nearly 50 years a widow, still commanding respect and social power, because I refuse to accept others' definitions of my worth. And you, my dear, are the granddaughter of Baron Sutton. Your blood is as gentle as any in that room. Do not let that woman erase your lineage. The older woman fixed Theodora with a sharp gaze. Stratham sees something genuine in you. I have known him since he was a boy. I watched him inherit the marquisate at 19 and struggle under the weight of responsibility. I have seen him reject every conventional young lady paraded before him for the past decade. Do you know why? I assume he found them wanting in some way. He found them dishonest, performing rather than being, claiming qualities they did not possess, hiding aspects of themselves they feared would be judged unfeminine. He became convinced that genuine connection was impossible, that everyone he met was simply playing a role. The Dowager smiled. And then he encountered you, a woman who, having nothing to lose, was simply herself. Honest, direct, unafraid to show intelligence or capability. You gave him something he thought impossible to find, authenticity. I gave him conversation, my lady, nothing more. If you truly believe that, you are less intelligent than I judged. The Dowager stepped closer, her voice gentling. He loves you, child, truly deeply, in the way people spend lifetimes searching for and rarely find. The question is not whether he will reject you. The question is whether you will have the courage to believe you are worthy of being loved. Theodora felt tears building and fought them back. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of hoping and being disappointed. Afraid of believing I could be more than invisible and discovering I was wrong. Afraid that if I allow myself to love him fully, the loss when reality intrudes will destroy me." Love always requires courage, my dear. There are no guarantees, no safety. But I can tell you this: Sebastian Harcourt is a man of honor and deep conviction. He does not offer his heart lightly. If he has given it to you, you may trust that gift absolutely. The conversation haunted Theodora through the following days. Sebastian continued to treat her with the same careful respect, continued to engage her mind and value her opinions. The other guests followed his lead, including her in conversations and activities as though she truly belonged. For the first time in 12 years, Theodora began to imagine what life might be like if she were not invisible. But Lady Wickham was far from finished. On the evening of the third day, she orchestrated her masterstroke. The guests had assembled in the drawing room after dinner when she rose with an expression of pained duty. "I fear I must address an uncomfortable matter," she announced, her voice carrying theatrical reluctance. "It concerns my niece, Miss Theodora Sutton, and I cannot in good conscience remain silent when the reputation of my dear friend, the Marquess of Stratham, is at risk." Conversation died. Every eye turned to Lady Wickham, then to Theodora, who felt ice spreading through her veins. This was it, the public destruction she had feared. Sebastian moved to Theodora's side immediately, a physical statement of support. "What are you suggesting, Lady Wickham?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I am suggesting nothing, my lord. I am simply sharing information that has recently come to my attention regarding my niece's behavior. It grieves me to speak thus, but duty demands honesty." She produced several letters from her reticule. "I have received correspondence from servants at Wickham Manor detailing a pattern of manipulation and calculation on Theodora's part. It appears she deliberately positioned herself to capture your attention, my lord, using knowledge gained through her management of household accounts to make herself seem more valuable than she is." "That is a lie," Theodora said quietly. "Is it? The evening you interrupted our dinner party to warn Lord Wickham about the Carrington investment. How convenient that you chose precisely the moment the Marquess was present to make your revelation. Any other time would have served the purpose, yet you selected that specific evening." "The matter was urgent. I discovered the fraud that afternoon and brought the information forward immediately." "Or you had known for days and waited for the perfect opportunity to put yourself forward." Lady Wickham's smile was poisonous. "I have spoken with several people who can attest to a pattern of attention-seeking behavior, carefully calculated to appear helpful while actually positioning yourself as indispensable. You have manipulated my family for years, and now you seek to manipulate the Marquess through similar means." The words were absurd, the logic twisted, but spoken with such conviction that Theodora could see doubt beginning to cloud some faces. This was how social assassination worked. Plant enough suspicion, wrap lies in plausible details, and let reputation do the rest. "You paint a portrait of remarkable cunning," Sebastian observed, his tone conversational but his eyes cold as winter. "Miss Sutton, managing to appear humble and self-effacing, while secretly orchestrating years of manipulation. Quite impressive, if true. I merely wish to protect you, my lord, from someone who has proven herself adept at deception." "Do you? How kind. Then perhaps you will not mind if I share some information of my own." Sebastian withdrew papers from his own coat pocket. "I took the liberty of conducting my own investigation into the management of Wickham Manor. What I discovered was fascinating." Lady Wickham's face went pale. "These are account ledgers from the estate, going back 7 years. Miss Sutton's handwriting is distinctive and appears throughout, careful notations, corrections of errors, systems implemented to prevent waste and fraud. According to the estate steward, whom I spoke with directly, Miss Sutton has been single-handedly managing Wickham Manor's finances for the past 7 years, preventing several disasters through her diligence and foresight. He moved to the center of the room, addressing all the guests. This woman you accuse of manipulation, Lady Wickham, has been saving your estate from bankruptcy while receiving no credit and enduring treatment that borders on servitude. She reorganizes inefficient systems, catches mathematical errors, identifies fraudulent schemes, negotiates with merchants for better terms, and manages a household staff with remarkable competence. He paused, his gaze hardening. And regarding your so-called correspondence from the servants, I took the liberty of speaking with the very staff you claim wrote these complaints. They spoke only of Miss Sutton's kindness, her fairness, and her tireless work to keep the household running despite your negligence. They were quite distressed to hear their names might be used to slander her. She was treated according to her station as a dependent relative, Lady Wickham protested, but her voice had lost its certainty. Her station? Sebastian's voice cut like a blade. Let us discuss station, shall we? Miss Sutton is the granddaughter of Baron Sutton, daughter of his second son. Her blood is as gentle as yours, Lady Wickham. Her father's debts do not change her birth. Yet you have treated her not as family, but as an unpaid servant, extracting her labor while denying her basic dignity. You have forbidden her a proper debut, prevented her from forming connections, and worked actively to ensure she remained invisible and unmarriageable. Why? Because her competence threatened to overshadow your daughter's carefully cultivated accomplishments? How dare you? Lady Wickham breathed. How dare I? How dare you, madam? You have systematically destroyed the prospects of a young woman guilty of nothing except being orphaned and intelligent. You have spread malicious gossip, attempted character assassination, and now manufacture accusations of manipulation to cover your own cruelty. I will not tolerate it. He turned to face the assembled guests. I asked you all here as witnesses, not to a house party, though I hope you have enjoyed the hospitality, but to a public declaration. I have spent 3 months coming to know Miss Theodora Sutton. I have observed her character, her intelligence, her resilience in the face of circumstances that would have broken lesser people. I have tested her knowledge, engaged her mind, and discovered a depth of person I had begun to believe did not exist. And I have reached a conclusion I wish to state publicly and unequivocally. He moved to stand before Theodora, taking her hands in his. His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Miss Theodora Sutton, I am asking you before these witnesses to do me the very great honor of becoming my wife. Not because I pity your circumstances, though those circumstances are appalling. Not because I value your financial acumen, though that is considerable, but because I love you. I love your honesty in a world of performance. I love your strength in the face of cruelty. I love your intelligence that you share without pretense. I love the way you see the world clearly and yourself with painful honesty. I want you as my partner, my equal, my duchess. Will you marry me? The room held absolute silence. Theodora felt tears streaming down her face, years of carefully maintained composure finally shattering. Yes, she whispered, then stronger. Yes, Sebastian, I will marry you. He kissed her there in the drawing room before all the guests, a public claiming that would be gossiped about for years. When they finally separated, the room erupted into applause and exclamations. Lady Wickham stood frozen. Her careful assassination attempt collapsed into ruins. Sebastian turned to face her, still holding Theodora's hand. You are no longer welcome at Stratham Park, Lady Wickham. Please arrange to leave in the morning, and understand this clearly. Miss Sutton is now under my protection. Any future attacks on her character or reputation will be met with social consequences you will find devastating. I have considerable influence in society and Parliament, and I will use every bit of it to ensure you face appropriate repercussions for years of cruelty. Am I understood? Lady Wickham opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and fled the room. Her daughters, shocked silent throughout the confrontation, followed after casting resentful glances at Theodora. The Dowager Countess approached with a satisfied smile. "Well done, Stratham. Your mother would be proud. And Miss Sutton, or I suppose I should say, the future Marchioness of Stratham, welcome to the family. I have a feeling you will bring life back to this house that it has lacked for far too long." The weeks that followed passed in a blur of activity. The engagement was announced in the papers, causing a sensation. The gossip that had painted Theodora as a manipulative fortune hunter shifted rapidly when the Dowager Countess and other influential guests made clear what had actually occurred. Instead, the story became one of romantic triumph. The intelligent, poor relation discovered by a discerning Marquess who valued substance over superficial accomplishments. Lady Wickham found herself facing social consequences Sebastian had promised. Families who had courted her favor now gave her the cut direct. Her daughters' marriages, while legally secure, suffered reputational damage by association. Whispers followed them. Were they as cruel as their mother? Had they participated in the systematic abuse of their cousin? Lord Wickham, embarrassed and chastened, attempted to repair relations with Theodora. She received him kindly, but made clear that the Wickham family would play no significant role in her new life. They had made their choices. She bore them no particular malice, but neither did she owe them forgiveness or inclusion. The wedding took place in April at Stratham Park, an intimate ceremony attended by those who truly mattered. The Dowager Countess, the Hartwicks, close friends of Sebastian's, and a handful of Theodora's family connections who had been kept at distance by the Wickhams. Her wedding dress was elegant ivory silk, the first garment she had ever owned that was truly hers, chosen for her, made to fit her specifically. As she walked down the aisle toward Sebastian, watching his face transform with love and wonder, Theodora felt the final chains of invisibility shatter. She was seen, she was valued, she was chosen. Their marriage was everything she had never dared hope for. Sebastian consulted her on estate management, political decisions, investment strategies. They established a study for her where she worked daily, managing not just Stratham Park, but several of Sebastian's other properties. Her analyses and advice proved so valuable that several of Sebastian's colleagues began requesting her consultation, creating an informal but influential role. She established a charity for dependent women and poor relations, offering them education, resources, and pathways to independence. It became her passion project, funded by her own marriage settlement that Sebastian had insisted be generous enough to give her real power. 3 years into their marriage, Stratham Park had transformed. No longer the echoing monument to loneliness, it rang with children's laughter. Theodora had given birth to twins, boys they named Thomas and Edmund, followed 18 months later by a daughter, Charlotte. The house filled with life, warmth, love. Sebastian had never been happier, his aloof reserve melting into open affection with family and friends. They encountered the Wickham family occasionally in London during the season. The meetings were polite but distant. Lady Wickham had aged badly, bitterness etching lines into her face. Prudence and Lavinia's marriages, while intact, lacked the social triumph they had once enjoyed. Georgiana had retreated to the country, uncomfortable with the gossip. Cecilia had eventually married a wealthy merchant, a match her mother considered deeply humiliating. At one such encounter, Lady Wickham attempted to approach Theodora with what might have been intended as reconciliation. Theodora did not cut her directly. That would be beneath her dignity. Instead, she greeted her with cool politeness and moved on, making clear through simple lack of engagement that the Wickhams were no longer relevant to her life. "You could have destroyed them utterly," Sebastian observed later that evening. They were in their private sitting room, watching their children play by the fireplace. "You have the influence now. One word from you in the right circles would complete their social ruin." "They destroyed themselves," Theodora replied, leaning into her husband's embrace. "I did nothing except become what I always was once someone bothered to look." Sebastian kissed her temple. I was the one who searched for years, rejecting every conventional match, convinced genuine connection was impossible, and then I found you. Or rather, you saved my uncle from financial disaster while I happened to be watching. Fate has a sense of humor. Indeed. He turned her face to his gray eyes warm with love. I love you, Theodora. Not despite your intelligence or capability, but because of them. You are my partner in every sense, and I thank Providence daily that your aunt was foolish enough to hide away the most remarkable woman in England long enough for me to find you. I love you too. She kissed him softly. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for being worth seeing. Their children interrupted the moment, demanding attention, pulling them into the life they had built together. Theodora took her husband's hand and let herself be led toward them. The best revenge was not destruction, it was this. A life lived so beautifully, so fully, that the people who had tried to diminish her simply ceased to matter. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this remarkable journey. If this story of patience, recognition, and love that sees beyond circumstance touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear that being overlooked is not the same as being worthless. Your support helps us continue creating stories of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of genuine love.